So as you probably know by now, OCD is classified as an anxiety disorder. And certainly if you're suffering from OCD, that won't come as any kind of surprise to you because you're probably feeling anxious a large amount of the time. Now, obviously feeling anxious is an incredibly unpleasant feeling. And understandably, what most people do when they feel anxious is they try and stop themselves feeling anxious in some way, shape or form. But the problem is with OCD is the more you try and stop yourself from feeling anxious, the more you try and get away from it, the less it actually helps you in the long term. So I want to show you a little bit about how this happens and why this happens, so you can understand how perhaps the things that you've been doing to try and help yourself might actually be making the problem worse. So bear with me because I'm going to do a little diagram here. Hopefully you're going to be able to see it. Okay, so let's do an axis. So here I want to write anxiety or discomfort. Some people don't necessarily even experience it as anxiety. Sometimes people just experience it as just a real feeling of uncomfortableness, something they just can't bear and want to get away from. So, and here we have time. Alright, so this is the feeling that you kind of wanted to get away from, and here we have time. So usually when something happens that makes your level of anxiety or discomfort go up, what do you tend to do? Well, in my experience, what most people with OCD tend to do is they tend to do something at this point here that's going to bring their anxiety back down again. So for example, they might well remove themselves from a situation, avoid in some way. So that usually brings our anxiety back down. Or perhaps if you think you've touched something contaminated, you'll wash your hands and then lo and behold, your anxiety comes down. So of course that makes a lot of sense because feeling anxious or really uncomfortable or perhaps disgusted, those feelings are really unpleasant. So of course in an ideal world you don't want to have them, you want to get away from them. But what's the problem with doing this? So let's have a look. The next time that you encounter a situation in which you become anxious or really uncomfortable or disgusted, what happens to the way you feel? It goes back up. So then you tend to perform a similar kind of behaviour or a ritual or a neutralising response, anything you do that tries to get you to feel better, and lo and behold, your anxiety comes down again. So over time, what happens to this pattern? Let's just extend this a bit longer. Every time you encounter a situation or a thought or something that brings up your level of anxiety, disgust, discomfort, you will tend to perform some kind of ritual or response that's going to bring that back down. So let's just imagine that this piece of paper is 5 miles long, right? How is this pattern going to look in 5 miles if you keep doing the same thing, apart from very messy? What's going to happen is you get a pattern that looks like this. You know, up, down, i.e., in the long term, nothing changes. You keep getting the same pattern. So that's the problem when we keep responding in the same way, trying to get rid of the anxiety, discomfort, disgust, whatever it is that you're trying to get rid of. When you keep doing that, yeah, it works a treat in the short term, or not always a treat, but it works to some degree in the short term, otherwise you wouldn't do it, right? But the problem is it doesn't change the problem in the long term. So let's have a look at what you need to do differently in order to make a bit of long-term change. So another axis, same thing, time, and here you have the feeling that you're trying to escape from. Sorry, not very good at writing upside down. Okay, so here's what you're going to learn how to do through watching these videos, and what we encourage people to do is when you find yourself in a situation in which you feel anxious or uncomfortable or distressed in some way, and actually as we talk about this more, we'll be encouraging you to deliberately put yourself in those situations, more about that later, rather than here performing the normal response, we want you to handle it differently. What we're asking people to do is, instead of trying to bring their anxiety level down, we want people to try and sit with that feeling, that really uncomfortable feeling of anxiety, discomfort, disgust. We want them to actually experience it without trying to do this. Now, why on earth would you put yourself through that, you might ask? Well, what we know is that over time, those feelings, however difficult and uncomfortable they are, over time, they will actually come down naturally on their own. It's a process that's called habituation. We get used to something. So, first day at school or first day at a new job, you might have been, really, really worried about it. But, day 100 at school or your new job, are you still worried about going there? No, because you've done it over and over again, so you've got used to it. So, what we want to show you is that if you start responding like this, over time, you're actually going to find the whole process much easier. You're going to find that your anxiety stops going up like this because you're actually used to the situation. You've learned that A, that feeling of anxiety will eventually come down. B, whatever it is that you were avoiding or trying to get rid of isn't as awful as you expected. Or perhaps, that you're learning that your feared consequence didn't happen, or just that you can actually handle it when you thought that you couldn't. So, I haven't got a long enough paper to do this all separately, but so here we have, when this happens a second time, what we have is that your anxiety will go up and then it will come down. And over time, what we find is that your anxiety starts to go up less and come down quicker. So what actually we're doing is we're finding that we're leveling this out. So in the long term, again, if we had a 5-mile long piece of paper, if we keep doing this, if we keep not responding and learning that actually you don't need to do this response and that you can handle it, in 5 miles time, you're going to find there isn't an anxiety peak. You're not going to have this up, down, up, down. You're going to have got used to it. Now, I understand that just looking at it like this, that might seem a little bit horrifying for you right now. But I'm going to teach you more about that, more about how to handle this, more about how to learn how to do things differently, and more about how to deal with the way that you feel when you don't perform this response. But for now, that's really just to show you that how the current way of dealing with the problem isn't helping you in the long term. And what we want you to do is to start not performing your usual response so that over time the anxiety goes away. Now, one of my patients once said to me, yeah, but why would I do that? Because if I look at this diagram, there's if I add up all this anxiety, it's actually less anxiety than if I add up all these bits. So theoretically, in the short term, you're going to feel more anxious for longer than if you carry on with this pattern. And, that's a very good point. The thing about treating OCD is you're not probably going to feel massively better in the short term. As in, you have to go through this feeling in order for it to start going away. And I know that sounds cruel, but the thing is, we just know from years of experiments and research, we know that this works really, really well. So you have to bear with it. You have to trust in the fact that if you do it and you stick through it, it actually will get better. Because if you imagine doing this for the rest of your life versus doing this for a few months or however long it takes, actually this way you're going to experience a lot more anxiety in the long term than if you get onto this diagram here. So this is really a really important principle that we're going to keep coming back to, and there'll be times when I refer to this diagram and I'll probably talk about it again. But for now, I just want you to start considering what would happen for you, or what do you fear would happen if you didn't do this? So I'm going to show you in another video, which is called The Vicious Flower, I'm going to show you how all these things that you do contribute to maintaining the problem.